Thank you, Phil, for the introduction. It's great to be here. It's a little cooler than it was Monday night when we were in town. We had a great night Monday. Governor Reynolds endorsed us for President of the United States. Doesn't get any better than that. But it was really, really nice. The weather was really nice outside. Then we went down to South Florida. We had the debate in Miami. So we had about 80 degrees and a little bit of mugginess still in Florida. And now back up here, my kind of warm Florida blood is now like, uh-oh, what am I in store for the next few months? My kids have never seen snow, so we have 6, 5, and 3. So this is going to be the time they're going to be able to do that. So they're looking forward to that. But I also know that as the weather starts to get cooler, that's when I start to see people throughout the Midwest show up in Southwest Florida. And I know that we'll have a lot. So I may have to do an Iowa caucus stop like early January in Marco Island for the Iowans that are going to fly back and do the caucus. So we'll see if we can work that in there. Well, it's great to be here on Veterans Day weekend, and it's important that we pay tribute to the people that have worn the uniform for this country. A veteran is somebody who has, at one point in their life, written a check payable to the United States of America for an amount up to and including that individual's life. You don't know where you're going to be sent. You don't know what duty you're going to be called upon to do. Fortunately, most people don't end up having to make the ultimate sacrifice, but some do. And that's a noble calling, especially in an era of an all-volunteer force. So anybody that has worn the uniform, just know that I appreciate your service. I thank you for your service, and our country wouldn't be what it is without your service. Our founding fathers understood that you can have the best Constitution in the world, you can have the best Declaration of Independence in the world. It doesn't run on autopilot. It requires every generation of Americans to step up and protect freedom when it's threatened, and sometimes that means making choices at the ballot box. Sometimes it means taking care of things that are going wrong inside your country. But sometimes it does mean that people have to put on that uniform and risk their life so that freedom continues to prevail throughout this country. And if you look through the years, the different types of conflicts that we've been in, we're losing a lot of the veterans at this point from not only World War II, but even from Korea. You go back 10 years, you could always find a lot of World War II vets now. Like that generation is rapidly passing from the scene, and I think there's a danger that we forget what they did for us with that conflict, because the world was at the brink. Had they not done what they did, this country would be in a much different spot than it ended up being. So we really have a responsibility to carry on their legacy, to make sure kids in our schools understand the sacrifices that were made by people who served, whether it's Normandy, Iwo Jima, all these conflicts in World War II, of course Korea as well. Very, very important. So we'll do that. As Commander-in-Chief, I will have an appreciation for the veterans and the service to this country. And part of it is just, yeah, I'm a veteran, but part of it is when you're in those situations, you see firsthand what a lot of these vets went through. And particularly after September 11th, we didn't have a draft. It was all volunteer. You had conflicts in Iraq, Afghanistan. They drug on for a long time. And the same people were getting sent over and over again. I remember being in Iraq and be at like a landing zone, getting ready to get on a helicopter, and there'd be a soldier and a Marine, and these would be people that are like 24, 25 years old that had spent more time in Iraq and Afghanistan since they left boot camp than they have in their own United States of America. That's not a normal burden to place on people. And so, yes, we lost a number of great warriors. We have many more that were wounded in action and had physical wounds when they came back. But we had many, many more than that bore the invisible wounds of war, coming back with things like post-traumatic stress. We didn't necessarily do a good job handling that for most of our history. I think we're starting to do a little bit better now. But you have a situation where we still have 22 suicides a day from veterans. And that's almost always driven by mental health, substance abuse, and similar things. And we need to do something about that. And I think the reason why we haven't been able to do is because ultimately bureaucracy is not going to be able to solve this problem. I remember leaving active duty and they gave me a packet of like veterans benefits. I didn't really need anything. I was fine. But I look at it and I'm like, I couldn't even make sense of it. It was just ridiculous bureaucracy. So you have veterans out there, they don't even necessarily know where to go to get help. You go to the VA, that's like pulling teeth to be able to do something. But yet, we have a huge amount of support throughout our country for veterans. Veterans groups, charities, individual volunteers, businesses, you name it, people want to help veterans. So what we're going to do as president is we're going to transcend the bureaucracy. We're going to use a model like we have in Florida where someone goes in to, say, the VA, they get plugged into a portal. That portal links not just whatever government resources are there, every veterans group that wants to be plugged in can. Churches can be plugged in, individual volunteers, charities, businesses. So there's a need, all that goes out to all that, and boom, government has linked a veteran with services and then gets out of the way. That's how you're going to end up getting success for some of this. And you know, it may be as much as, it can be just a small thing that we may not even think is a big deal. Maybe you have a list of volunteers who are just willing to show up if a veteran's having a tough time. So you get that, vets have a tough time, shows up to the house, says, hey, you know, I'll go take you to lunch, and then they talk. Just something like that can make a big difference. We have groups in Florida that help vets with PT, post-traumatic stress. One of them does service dogs. They train the service dogs, pair them with the vet with PTS, and the dog knows how to recognize the symptoms and helps mitigate it. And guess what? The suicide rate for that is almost zero when you go through that. So there's help that's out there. We just need to not let bureaucracy take everything down, and we need to have government facilitate linkages from veterans to all these other things. So we will do that, and we'll make sure we do. The other thing we're going to do is, I talk to veterans now. There's of course issues that veterans have, and they talk about those issues. But most veterans are less concerned about themselves than they are concerned about the state of our military right now, and they're worried about what they see in our military. I was just talking to someone the other day. He was a Navy reservist, and he said that his commander, the flag officer in command of his unit, was like, the specialties were like climate change and DE&I. And I'm thinking to myself, that is not what the military is about. It's not about social agenda. It's not about woke ideology. It's none of that. It's about achieving the mission. That is what the focus has got to be on. So you end up with a situation, our recruiting is at the lowest level since after Vietnam when the draft got abolished. You have morale that's low. You have promotions that are done not purely on merit, but by other considerations, which also hurts morale. We need a change. I mean, we need some help. So on day one as Commander-in-Chief, I'm taking out all the social experimentation, all the woke, all the political, ripping it out and throwing it in the trash can. We're going to be back to mission first. We're going to be back to focusing on merit. And that's how you recruit people. That's how you have a military that's going to be able to do the job to be able to deter conflict and to deter our enemies. And ultimately, the way you achieve peace is through strength. If we're strong, if we're able to back up our word, people are not going to want to mess with this country. Under Biden, people know that this is a president that's out to lunch. This is a president that they can push buttons on and they can take advantage of. And that's why the world is doing what it's doing. So help is going to be on the way there. We also look at, I look at what's going on with Israel and Hamas. And I said this, I was actually in Iowa the day it happened. And I said, it's important that we stand with Israel, but not just that day. In the days and weeks to come, you're going to start to see people blame Israel. You're going to start to see them try to kneecap their ability to defend themselves. And we can't have this moral equivalence between Israel defending itself and Hamas terrorists who perpetrated the massacre to begin with. So Israel has every right to defend itself to the hilt, and that means eliminating Hamas once and for all. And the idea that you would send money to the Gaza Strip. They say it's humanitarian assistance. That money will be commandeered by Hamas. Hamas right now has Americans held hostage. They have Israelis held hostage. They have other nationalities held hostage, and you're rewarding them by sending them money? Don't tell me Israel is to blame. If you're worried about Gaza civilians, that problem is Hamas's problem. Hamas is causing that. You should be telling Hamas to release every hostage and to unconditionally surrender. And when they do that, you're not going to have to worry about any of the other stuff. And then you see what's going on in our own country. I mean, look, I joke around like I was born and raised in Florida, minimum wage jobs, baseball player, trying to make something of myself. And so I end up getting recruited to play baseball. So I'm in New England, and I spend 7 years in New England. I joke to people for school, I'm one of the few people in the entire country that went through both Harvard and Yale and came out more conservative than when he went in. That's not easy to do, but I definitely did it. But even in those days where you had very left-wing stuff, I don't think students would have gone out and celebrated when the blood wasn't even dry on the Israeli victims, celebrated a terrorist attack like that. This is way beyond anything I thought was possible, as much of a low regard I have for some of the stuff that goes on in our universities. So you have this out there, you have angry mobs chasing Jewish students, they're running for their lives, and these universities are not doing anything about it. I can tell you this, when I'm president, I'll send the Justice Department after these universities. We're going to hold them accountable because they're basically violating the civil rights of these Jewish students by letting these angry mobs rule the halls and rule the streets there. And if you have foreign students on visas that are out there protesting in favor of Hamas, I'm canceling their visas and I'm sending them home. I don't have time for this. We got to start being smart. And that's why, I said when you have people in Congress, the squad, some of these people saying that we should be taking in Gaza refugees. Egypt won't take any, Saudi won't take any, Jordan won't take any, none of that. Why should we be dumping hundreds of thousands of people from the Gaza Strip into our country? That does not benefit you. It does not benefit this country. And we've got to stop being politically correct when it comes to this. Some will say that, some are terrorists, but some are freedom fighters, all this other stuff. Look, they elected Hamas in the Gaza Strip, okay? They were cheering in the streets in Gaza when October 7th attacks happened against Israel. They were cheering in the streets in Gaza on September 11th, 2001, when Al-Qaeda knocked down the Twin Towers. I remember that very distinctly. So the question isn't, are all those people terrorists? The question is what type of culture do they have, and what would that mean importing that to the United States? The culture's toxic. They teach kids to hate Jews. The maps that they use in school did not have Israel even listed on the map, and they believe that Israel does not have a right to exist and should be eradicated. So why would you want to import that into the United States? Europe has done that. And you look at what's happening in Europe now, those were stupid immigration policies. So we're not going to make that mistake here in the United States. And yeah, we don't want the illegal immigration, of course. But our legal immigration system, if you want to come into this country, you should accept and support the founding principles of this country, and you should be willing to assimilate into this country. And if you're not willing to do that, that's not benefiting the United States. So we'll make sure. But so as you see that, one of the things first, when the attack against Israel happened, I knew it was going to change the Middle East because it's a 9/11. Actually, it's like 20 9/11s, how small Israel is. But then I also knew, just being governor of Florida, it was going to affect my state. I've got the second biggest Israeli-American population in the country. I've got a lot of back and forth. The people travel, friends and family. So lo and behold, a couple days later, I've got Floridians that are just stranded. Biden is not helping them. State Department, embassy, they're basically hanging these people out to dry. And so I'm like, all right. So I did an executive order, and we scrambled planes. We got them into Ben Gurion Airport, and we were able to rescue over 700 Americans and bring them back to the state of Florida. And my wife and I were there when the first plane came. There were 271 passengers, 91 children were coming down. So you literally have families of these very young children. Some of them, had we not acted when we did, some of them may have ended up being taken hostage by Hamas. And so Biden sat on his hands, and we decided, we're going to spring into action and we're going to do it. But there was one family came down, and the mother, then they were from South Florida, and the mother just pointed to her young daughter and was like, the last 2 nights, she just said, I don't want any more bombs. I don't want any more bombs. No more rockets. I want Florida. I want Florida. I want Florida. So we were able to bring them back to Florida, get the job done. And then when the planes went back to Israel to pick more, we were able to bring a lot of donated supplies, medical supplies, helmets, Kevlar vests, you name it. We're able to do that. So we were able to step up and do stuff. So I knew that. The other thing I knew was it increased my resolve to do something about our own border here in this country, because Israel has some of the strongest border security in the world, and yet this still happened. Do you not think that our enemies have not been taking advantage of our southern border over these last 2.5 to 3 years? Of course they have. They've had 8 million people come across the border illegally, hundreds on the government's own terror watch list. I said at the debate the other night, and the media got mad, that these DC elites, with their indifference to our own border and not wanting to control our own border, they are exposing you and your family to higher risk of fentanyl coming into your communities and terrorism. Oh, there's no terrorists that have come across the border. Do you honestly think out of 8 million, there's not one jihadist that decided to come? Of course there are. Give me a break. We know that there's bad apples that are coming through. So that's what our government has done. It's put this country at risk. I think there will likely be a terrorist attack that happens, unfortunately, that we're going to be able to trace back to the border at some point in the future. That's why when I'm president, I'm taking all those people that came, that Biden let in, we're going to send them back to their home country. That's what we have to do. You can't just have this many people coming and not know who they are. So we're going to do that. We're also going to declare the border to be a national emergency on day one. It's not going to be an issue that we let linger. We're going to get after it on day one. We're going to stop the invasion of people coming. We'll change the policy so they're not even allowed to come and make any claims in this country. They can wait in Mexico if they want to make claims, and we'll do that. We are going to build the border wall, and we are actually going to have Mexico pay for it. I remember that promise. And here's how you do it. Well, first, so 2016, probably the most famous promise any candidate's made in recent years, build the wall of Mexico, pay for it. Obviously didn't happen. Donald Trump, about a month ago, he was in Iowa, and he said, well, there was no legal mechanism he could have used to get Mexico to pay for the border wall. Now, that wasn't what he was saying in 2016, because people were saying, how are you going to get me? I'm going to get Mexico. I'm going to get Mexico to pay. Nevertheless, he said that. Then he said last week that he never said Mexico would pay for the entire wall, that he only said Mexico would pay for a piece of the wall. Come on. Then today, there was an interview that came out where he said that he did build the wall and he did actually have Mexico pay for it. Guys, don't whiz on my leg and tell me that it's raining, okay? That's insulting our intelligence. If he had built the wall, you would not have 8 million people that Biden would have been able to let in. That's the whole purpose of building a wall, so that people like Biden can't open the border. Otherwise, what good is the wall if somebody can just let in 8 million people? So it didn't get done, but here's how you do it. Yes, Mexico's just not going to fork over money. Of course not. The way you do it, and what he could have done and didn't do, you impose fees on remittances that foreign workers send back to their home country. Mexico, Central America, all over the world. There's $100 billion a year in remittances that get sent. Even a small fee would be enough to pay for the border wall. So we're going to get this done, because I'm sick of hearing talk about it. We had a hurricane in Southwest Florida that came by, knocked out these bridges. People said it was going to take 6 months. We got them rebuilt in a matter of days. When we put our mind to something, we get it done. So we're going to get that wall done. We have to get it done. But maybe even more important than that is the root cause of all the chaos at the border is the Mexican drug cartels. They are eating our lunch at the border. Human trafficking, sex trafficking, drug trafficking. The amount of fentanyl that's poured into this country is astronomical. The amount of deaths continue to mount. And the thing about the fentanyl is you are, in it, and a lot of these are younger kids, high school, college kids. They will buy some pill thinking it's something else. If it's laced with fentanyl, it poisons them and they can die just off one pill. We actually had a baby, an 18-month-old in Florida. The family had rented an Airbnb unit. There happened to be fentanyl residue on the carpet. The baby was crawling on the carpet, came in contact with the fentanyl residue, and the baby died from that. So, how is this acceptable in this country? So the cartels are basically invading this country and they're killing our people. And the people in D.C. and in the media, they seem to think, well, there's nothing you can do about it. Really? I'm sorry, as commander-in-chief, you not only have a right, you have a duty to fight back when people are killing your citizens. And that's what we're going to do when we deal with these drug cartels. We're going to treat them like foreign terrorist organizations, and we are going to authorize the use of deadly military force. I guarantee you, they start trying to come through the border with the fentanyl on their back. We drop a couple of them at the border. You're going to see big-time change in behavior. They've been able to call the shots. No more. There's a new sheriff in town, not letting it happen anymore. I don't want to see these deaths. I don't want to see these families have their lives shattered any longer. We're going to stand up for the American people, and we're going to get the job done. You also look at all the problems that we're having in terms of the prices and the grocery and the gas and all this stuff, and that was induced by the government. I mean, it's important to point out it didn't just happen. The COVID policies under both Trump and Biden, the amount of money that was borrowed, printed, and spent from March of 20 for the last couple years, that fueled the worst inflation we've had in the past 40 years. And government caused it, and now we're in a situation where government wants to keep spending money at these levels, which are just not going to work. So we need a new sheriff in town when it comes to spending. In Florida, I vetoed billions of dollars in wasteful spending. We've paid down 25% of our state's debt just since I've been governor, all the while cutting taxes by record amounts. So you got to be willing to veto spending bills that are bloated. You got to be willing to hold Congress accountable. Ultimately, we're going to be pushing for term limits for members of Congress and a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, because those are ways to make sure that we change Congress for the long haul. Another thing that's holding the economy back is Bidenomics, the executive orders, the rules, the regulations. We're taking them all on day one, putting them in a ball, pitching them in the trash can where they belong. We're going to liberate people from Bidenomics. The other thing is the bad energy policy that you see out of Biden. We're going to take the Green New Deal. We're going to take all of that, and we're going to nix it on day one. We're going to open up our energy here in the United States for production. We should be the dominant energy producer in the entire world. We should not ever have to go hat in hand to Venezuela or Saudi Arabia for any type of energy, and we have the capacity to do it here in the United States of America. That'll lower your gas prices, that'll lower energy costs across the economy, and it'll make us stronger as a country vis-a-vis Russia, vis-a-vis China, vis-a-vis Iran. So I think it's a no-brainer. So we will do that, and that'll make a big, big difference. Yeah. The final thing I'll say, and I'll take some questions if you guys want, but I'm running for president because our country has been spiraling downward. We see the economic problems, we see cultural problems, we see the problems with our military posture all across the board. And if we continue going in this direction, you're going to see those problems accelerate even more. But it's not enough as Republicans to just say, well, we'll just manage this decline a little bit better than the Democrats. No, we need to reverse the decline. We need to usher in a revival for America, and we need a new birth of freedom throughout this country. I've got a lot of people that moved to Florida because of all the things that happen in these other states, I just think to myself, like, that's great that people view Florida as a refuge to be able to come, but I can't have everybody that's living under bad policies feel like they have to move to Florida. We need to make sure this freedom is there for all 50 states, and we got to get it right for everybody. So that's what we're going to do. But we're in a situation where freedom is on the line. The direction of our country, if we don't fix it now, it's going to be irrevocable, I think. And you need somebody that can serve 2 full terms and actually get reelected, because otherwise the Democrats can come in and reverse everything after 4 years. You really need it to stick. But now's the time for us to stand up and be counted. And I don't mind, look, as the candidate, as the president, I will take all the hits, I will take all the barbs, I'll take all the insults, because it's not about me, it's about you. It's not about my issues and solving any issues with me. It's about solving your issues and solving issues for the country. And time is running out, and we need this happening right now. Our founders understood when they went to Philadelphia in 1787 to ratify the Constitution, or to write the Constitution, they studied the history of every republic and the history of mankind, because they wanted to inform themselves on what had happened throughout human history. And what they noted was there was only one thing that really united every republic that had ever been tried in human history, and it was this: every single one of them had failed. So they understood it fell to the United States of America to determine once and for all, could people really govern themselves? Could you have a society based on the idea our rights come from God, not from the government, that we live under a rule of law, not the rule of individual men? Or was mankind forever destined to live under various forms of despotism? And they fully expected this country would decide that question for all of human history. When Benjamin Franklin walked out of that convention, he was asked, did you give us a monarchy or a republic? He said, a republic if you can keep it. Because they understood this stuff doesn't run on autopilot. They understood the Constitution, the Declaration. That was just the ticket to the dance. That didn't mean that you were going to have freedom prevail without any fight. You would have to step up and fight and nurture freedom when it was under attack. So that is our task now, and that is what we have to do. So as your nominee, I promise I'll fight for you. I'll win for you and your family. And I will lead this country's revival. So thank you all. I'm asking for your support in January, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you so much.
With the Israel attacks, do you believe that there was an intelligence failure on the part of the United States? And what would you do with the intelligence agencies to make an improvement?
So I can't speak about whether it was or not in the United States, but I definitely think they're in dire need of improvement. I mean, I think that we've seen over the years, we've seen a politicization of the intel agencies. We've seen them take their eye off the ball. When I was in the Congress, I served 3 terms as a U.S. congressman. I've recovered from that experience entirely and never drank the Kool-Aid. But I was the kind of the leading agitator to move America's embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And so if you remember Obama, I think he promised it, then he didn't do it. Trump promised it, and he came into office and he punted on it. And so when he punted, I'm like, all right, we're going to start ginning up some static on this. So I actually I went to Israel because I was the national security, I ran the National Security Committee, and I had oversight over State Department, so I went out there. So I met in the embassy and then in Tel Aviv, CIA state, like probably 20 people around the room. And I just said, okay, I'm going to go around the room. If we move our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, what's going to happen? And every single one of them said it would be like World War III. I mean, every single one of them said it would be a disaster, you can't do it, all this other stuff. Well, eventually, we moved the embassy, and what happened? Nothing. Every one of them was wrong about this. And I'm just thinking to myself, okay, if all of them were wrong, like not one person had a dissenting view, I think you got a lot of groupthink. I think you've got a lot of assumptions that they just share that are not valid assumptions. I think you need a big overhaul. And so we'll go big there, and it needs to be done. Yes. Yes.
The Bible, God instituted government. Can you comment on the spiritual condition of America as you see it? I'm a born-again Christian.
God bless you, my friend. God bless you. No, I think, so here's what I'd say. In Florida, one of the things we did when I came in was recognize that, government in and of itself is just simply not adequate to deal with all the society's problems. So what we did was we launched a faith initiative to where the faith-based community could actively participate in state government programs. And so for an example, when we do welfare now in Florida, my wife spearheaded a program called Hope Florida. Actually, your governor sent people down. You guys are going to do something similar here in Iowa. You go in, and look, it's a variety of people, but let's say it's a single mom. You go in, instead of just giving a check and then coming back, you now plug into what's called the care portal, and we've invited the churches and the synagogues, charities, individuals, businesses, whoever wants to be there. So that mom needs something, it goes through the portal. Guess what happens? The churches get it, they come, they tend, and you know what happens? You never see that person show up for government assistance again. Why? Because it's not just about dollars and cents. What they're providing is they're providing spiritual nourishment. They're providing spiritual support that's helping get somebody on a pathway to independence, self-sufficiency, and ultimately prosperity. So as president, we need to harness that. It's not just about government. It's about these important institutions, particularly our faith-based institutions, because that's what gives people hope. And I think there's been many decades in this country where elites in our society have turned their back on what the faith community can offer in terms of helping people, particularly those who are less fortunate. We have so much goodwill in this country, in spite of all the problems, in spite of all the nonsense, in spite of the media, in spite of all the poison you see out there. The majority of people in this country are good, decent people, and they want to see this country succeed, and they're willing to do things to help a neighbor in need. So we have harnessed that, I think, in ways that have been very, very effective. So that's one thing. The other thing is we need to provide adequate protection for religious liberty in this country, and we're not doing that right now. You had this case in the Supreme Court. Some of you may have heard about it out of Washington State, Coach Kennedy. He was a high school football coach, and after the games, he would go to midfield and he would lead prayer. It's voluntary. No one had to do it, and he did it. But just the fact that he was praying on a public high school football field, he lost his job because of that. So he had to go all the way to the Supreme Court, and he won 6-3. And it was portrayed as a victory for religious freedom. Well, yeah, superficially, obviously, I would have voted with the 6 and said that he gets his job back. But the fact that that case is even being brought, the fact that he has to even do that shows you religious freedom is not something that's being protected adequately in this country. And I think the root of it is ultimately the political left. They say that, if we say under God, that's an establishment of religion in violation of the First Amendment. Of course it's not. But they try to act like anything involving God is establishment of religion. You can't establish a religion. And you can't actually establish a denomination. Of course, that's what the First Amendment says. But they're the ones that really want to establish a religion. It's just not a normal religion. It's leftism. It's a secular religion. And what they want is they want to tell you, okay, you're a Christian. You can go to church, knock yourself out for that 1 hour on Sunday, but don't be bringing that. Don't be bringing that anywhere else. Don't bring that to your job. Don't do that. And if you ever have a conflict between their agenda and your faith, they expect you to bend the knee, and that their agenda should trump your free exercise of religion. That is not religious liberty, as our founding fathers understood it. That actually takes us back to a generation prior to the Constitution when they had religious toleration. So there were people that could practice faith, but it was only within the bounds of what the elites thought were appropriate. And ultimately, that's what the political left wants. You practice your religion within the limits that they prescribe. Our founders rejected that. They said your right to practice is God-given. It's not granted to you by government or political elites. You have the right to do that, and government cannot infringe those rights. So we need to get back to that as the guiding light of this country, and we cannot let the political left steamroll people's religious liberty anymore.
Governor, I want to thank you for being here tonight. We are the heart of the heartland here in Iowa, home here in Ames of Iowa State University. We take our political responsibilities extremely serious. And my concern is our current administration, they either don't understand or are unwilling to admit that the Constitution is the basis of our government. And either they're ignorant or just incapable of understanding that. And my question to you, or my suggestion to you, is to visit with us about why they feel like they can be emboldened to ignore the Constitution and to do things like executive orders, which, pardon me, I don't believe that's in the Constitution. Does anybody, have you read about executive orders in the Constitution? It just disturbs me that we have a administration that loves bureaucracy, loves to spend money, doesn't balance the budget. It's an embarrassment.
Amen to that. I mean, I think that, I think it's intentional, though. I think it goes back to the modern progressive era at the turn of the 20th century. People like Woodrow Wilson, they were very honest about they did not like the U.S. Constitution because they thought that, and it inhibited their ideological ambitions. And so they wanted to basically go from a system where Congress was supreme in lawmaking to an executive branch that would sprout this massive bureaucracy so that they can govern society through bureaucratic so-called experts that they would nuzzle into the bureaucracy. And so that was the genesis of it. And then every kind of iteration of leftism has relied on expanding what's now become a fourth branch of government. Founding fathers created three branches of government: legislative, executive, judicial. They did not create an administrative state that exists outside, effectively, the contours of even the electoral process, where they implement their will against us without our consent, weaponize agencies against the American people. But what's happened with this is the logical culmination. Our founders would have understood this. When you don't exercise constitutional accountability over power, and power accumulates, human nature being what it is, they are going to abuse the power. That's the whole reason the founders had checks and balances, separation of powers, because they knew you couldn't let anyone that had power, like, yes, George Washington was not going to abuse power because his character was such that he understood there was a broader good of a republic and all that. But eventually, you're going to get people in there, they're going to abuse power. That's human nature. So you have to have an ability to government to control itself through checks and balances. And what's happened over the years is that's been abandoned. Congress has empowered the bureaucracy because Congress likes the bureaucracy legislating against you, because then they don't have to be held responsible. You know, they're doing something like Biden wants to force you to buy an electric car through this stuff. Congress never voted on that. So you can't hold Congress accountable for it. And so they like when the bureaucracy does its dirty work so that they're not held accountable. But you've also had presidents have not used their Article II powers to discipline the bureaucracy. For example, the FBI and the DOJ. In Washington, they say, oh, the FBI and the DOJ, they're, quote, independent agencies. They are not independent. They are executive agencies that answer to the elected president of the United States. If they're independent, that means they're unaccountable. Trust me, you do not want the agencies that can jail you to be independent without being held accountable. They're the ones you got to hold accountable the most. And so we're going to do that as president. We're going to be involved in making sure that we're policing their conduct. We're not going to let them weaponize power against people for political use. If you have FBI doing some of that, I'm going to fire the people that are responsible for it. We're not going to put up with it. We're going to have accountability. But it's also, when you talk about the weaponization, yes, it's bad. And if you're a victim of it, it's bad. But it's also an opportunity cost. The more they're focused on policing disinformation or worried about parents going to school board meetings, or all these things that we never thought would have ever been done in the past. They're not focusing on crime in the streets. They're not focusing on people coming across the border. They should be focusing on the core mission of their agencies. So it's mission creep as well. So there's going to be a whole new way of doing business when I go in there on day one. And the people in D.C. are not going to like it. They are going to squeal. They're going to complain. The media is going to hate it. But we have lost control of our government by allowing these agencies to basically exert their will without accountability. So 2025, January 2025 is the date that we return this government to its rightful owners, which is we, the American people. So the question is on things like gender ideology and trying to inject transgenderism into society. Well, that's going to be dead on arrival in our administration. When we have a record of Florida of standing up against it, I mean, we had, and it's sad that this is going on, in parts of this country, they will teach kids in kindergarten that their gender is a choice, that they could have been born in the wrong body. And so we saw that and we're like, we're not doing that in Florida. So we had legislation, Parents' Rights in Education, saying no sexualization of the curriculum, no gender ideology, particularly in the young grades. And the left hated it, the media hated it, which was expected. But we also had opposition from the most powerful corporation in the history of Florida. One of them you may have heard of, Disney. And a lot of people said, well, there's no way the governor is going to be able to stand. I mean, Disney's too powerful. They get everything they want. You never go up against them. They'll steamroll you, all this other stuff. And, you know, that may have been true for Florida history before I became governor. But, you know, I took an oath to support and defend the people of my state. I don't subcontract out my leadership to a woke corporation based in Burbank, California. So we stood our ground. We delivered. We won that battle. And now that is not permitted in Florida schools. But it's also, and we also, and it's sad that we have to even do some of this stuff, we protected women's sports to say women can compete, girls can compete fairness and integrity, not having this. We protected bathrooms and locker rooms for our girls and our women so that men aren't able to come into those very sensitive spaces. And it's sad that we have to do this, but we actually had to do legislation to prohibit sex change operations for minors, these gender surgeries where they're doing on these young kids. It's irreversible, and what happens is when they get older, they're sterilized, they regret it, and so we've had really powerful testimony saying how bad that is. That is a violation of the Hippocratic Oath, so we hold people accountable if they do it, and doctors lose their medical license in Florida if they do that now. So we've stood up against all that. But part of the reason we do it, yes, I think it's very harmful for kids to be putting this into their head. And my wife and I mean, we have 6, 5, and 3-year-olds at home. I can't even imagine broaching that subject with these kids. Like, not in a million years. I mean, you know, my kids, they're watching cartoons. They're playing, you know, they're doing coloring books. They're doing all this other stuff. I mean, we actually do when, you know, they're in school, but when they're on the road with us, we do the homeschool, the spelling, and all this stuff they're doing. And it's like innocent, right? To be talking about this stuff is unbelievable. And that's the thing, I think the Disney thing was they're trying to put this in their programming. They're trying to impose agenda. And I just think that kids should be able to go to school, watch cartoons, just be kids without having an agenda shoved down their throats. Just let kids be kids again. But it's also an issue of, are we going to be a society rooted in truth or not? Because the gender ideology, that's a political agenda. Don't tell me that a man can get pregnant and expect me to accept it. I will not. It's not true. And we can't have our country operating on things that are obviously false. And so we'll make sure that throughout all the federal agencies, we're not doing that. In Florida, we actually did protections for students. Teachers are not allowed to force them to pick pronouns. We got out of the pronoun Olympics. We're not playing that game. Yes.
We had, in 22, you had a red wave in Florida. In Iowa, we had one even bigger. And if that doesn't happen in 24, but you're elected, and we've got a split Congress, how are you going to deal with that in trying to get the things accomplished you want to get accomplished?
Well, look, I mean, I think that the reality is our party has been losing elections. You know, Donald Trump said we get tired of winning. Well, ever since 2016, I'm tired of losing all these races, okay? We need to start winning again. Iowa has shown how it's done with your governor. We did it in Florida. A year ago this week, I won the biggest victory that's ever been won in a governor's race for a Republican in our state, including even winning urban areas like Miami-Dade by 11%. These are things that Democrats used to win by 25 or 30%. So it can be done. And look, you've got to be prepared for whatever happens, but I really believe the way I operate is politics is a team sport. It's not just about me. Like, I may be the standard bearer, but ultimately it's about what I can do for you. And in order to do that, I've got to work to help elect people up and down the ballot. So if I'm the nominee, we will absolutely recapture the U.S. Senate. You can take that to the bank. I'm going to put work into it. I'll put money into it. We're going to do that. And we will expand our majority in the United States House of Representatives. And so what you have to do, though, is you have to understand, even in a two-term presidency, you only have a certain amount of time to really strike while the iron's hot legislatively. So your first 100, 150 days, you got to be ready to go on day one. And I think back when Trump came in, they were not ready for doing anything. I mean, what was Trump's first 24 hours consumed with? Was it the border? No. Was it draining the swamp? No. He was arguing with the media about the crowd size at his inauguration. That's not the type of distraction we have time for. You got to be focused and disciplined and focused solely on the mission. So we'll be ready on day one with hundreds and hundreds of appointees that will be confirmed. And it's not just who your Secretary of State is. You need people 2 or 3 rungs down that are going to be strong and that are going to really hold the bureaucrats accountable. We'll have all the things we need to do to reverse executive orders and all the things we have to do there from an executive perspective. We'll also have the legislation ready, working with people in Congress that we're going to pursue. And one of the things you have to do is in the Senate, Biden, he had 50 senators, and he did all this damage because they put it through this budget reconciliation where there's no filibuster, so you don't need 60. So he did a lot. We're going to repeal his stuff through that, but then we're going to do our stuff through that, and that's how you do it. So we're thinking about all of this, and I never promise or say anything that I don't think can get done, because some people claim they're going to do all this stuff, some of these ridiculous promises, that are made, and then they're not followed through. Everything I promised I would do as governor of Florida, I did. 100% delivery, and that's how we roll, and that's what I'm going to do. Yes, ma'am. Well, it's a good question. I mean, I think the media, obviously, they're agenda-driven, right? They have their partisanship that they try to pursue. But I think the thing is trust in media is at an all-time low. Most Americans understand that they have an agenda. So the way you cut through it is to speak the truth directly to the American people. They went after Ronald Reagan when he was president. What would he do? He would address the American people directly. And what I find is, because I get attacked more than anybody. I mean, I think if you look at certainly no governor has been attacked more than me since COVID, probably in modern American history. But what I find is that, media can do stuff. They can try to create a narrative, and some people consume that, and they may believe it. But when they actually see me with their own eyes, that is what they go by. They do believe what they see. So if they trust you and they think you're speaking the truth, the media is garbage at that point to them. So I think that's it. You got to be out there as president. You got to use the bully pulpit. You got to speak directly to the people. You go over the heads of the media and speak the truth. We have so much deceit in this country right now with social media and corporate media that the truth is powerful because it cuts through the lies. And it's refreshing when people hear someone speaking the truth. That's what we did in Florida. I mean, I had nothing but attacks from media all 4 of my first years, and we won the biggest victory ever because people knew, they understood there was an agenda, and they understand that I was standing for them and doing what's right. Yes?
So recently, the Iowa Board of Regents announced that it was going to be adopting a resolution banning most forms of DEI in our free public universities. However, not banning certain DEI measures that are going to be basically forced by these accrediting agencies that accredit our universities. Do you have any plan, if you think there could be any way to tackle that so that we can completely remove, this cancer from our universities?
Yeah, day one, the accreditation stops. We're gonna change the accreditation. We're gonna nuke the accreditation cartel. And that's interesting because, I've dealt with, so we eliminated DEI in Florida. We're just not following the accreditors on this because we think it's discriminatory. I mean, I think it violates the Constitution to treat people differently based on their race. So we're not doing that. And what are they? They're not going to accredit University. I mean, University of Florida now was ranked 15th overall of all universities by the Wall Street Journal, top public. They were the Wall Street Journal rated them the top public in the country, and they're fifth in the country by U.S. News for public universities. So what are you going to do? Not accredit that? But basically, it's controlled by the Federal Department of Education. So what we're going to do is we're going to approve accreditors. Instead of saying you only get accredited if you do DEI, we're going to say you will not get accredited if you do DEI. So we're going to flip it and make sure. But that's the thing. We complain about kind of colleges and the indoctrination and left-wing professors, but there's a whole ecosystem that leads to that, and the accreditation's a big part of that. So we're going to tackle that. We're going to finish that as an issue that's going to be in a much better spot. But what we've also done in Florida, we now have all tenured professors must undergo review every 5 years and can be let go for poor performance. So what you have is, if you're doing good scholarship, well, God bless you, you'll get rubber stamped. But if you're using tenure to indulge in political activism, we don't need to be funding that. That's not the appropriate use of a university. And so we actually have a university in Sarasota called New College. And so I became governor. It was like legislature, some of the people came to me, they're like, what are we going to do with this? I'm like, what is it? I didn't even know what it was because it's like, but it's actually a beautiful campus right there in Sarasota. It's a liberal arts, but it was basically like a Marxist commune, like left of the left. And I'm just thinking to myself, so some in the legislature said, we should just shut it down. I'm like, all right, that's fine if you want to do. They didn't have the votes to shut it down. So I said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. So I appointed 7 conservatives to the board of trustees. They fired the president, hired a conservative president, eliminated DEI and CRT, abolished the gender studies department, and they reframed the university's mission to be the top classical public liberal arts college, like Hillsdale College in Michigan. And so they're going through this cultural change, and they're using our law with these tenured professors. So they're filtering out, some of the old guard who was part of kind of the old orthodoxy, and they're bringing in a lot of really good professors who want to be part of it. Because, it's interesting. There are even liberal professors who understand that the intellectual environment is so toxic now that even they want to get out. So it's not just conservative professors. It's like non-Marxist traditional liberals even want to get out. So we have all these people that are coming, and the media, they hate that we're doing this because, the problem I think with a lot of Republicans is they never fight the left on the institutional level. And in Florida, I've beat the left on the institutional level. I mean, we're not letting them take over every institution because if they do, we're going to eventually lose all these fights. So we're winning. So the media, they hate it because they know we're succeeding. And so they'll say oh, well, there's a brain drain, professors are leaving New College, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just thinking to myself, well, hold on. If a professor of intersectional Marxism is leaving the state of Florida, that is not a negative for the state of Florida. That means we're winning in Florida.
I'd like to know what you can do to protect us, the elderly, when it comes to Social Security, because that one woman, I can't remember her name because I'm nervous, supposedly took all of them took money out of Social Security to pay for this, that, or other thing. Then every time we have a possible shutdown of the government, they threaten that they're gonna, shut off our Social Security. It's just not easy to live as elderly.
No, I agree.
Thinking that they're gonna take our
Ponzi scheme.
living, yeah,
It's a
take our
Ponzi
living away from us. How,
No, well, so first of all, that's scare tactics. I mean, Social Security, if you don't have appropriations, Social Security is on a different plane with that. It's a mandatory spending program. So that's just trying to scare seniors with that. If you have a lapse in appropriations, the Social Security continues to go. I think they may be talking about maybe the debt limit at some point with that. But even that, I mean, the debt limit, when they hit a debt limit, the only thing you have to do for sure is pay the interest on the debt. That if you don't do that, then you default. But as long as you do that, you don't default. So what I would do is I'd pay the interest on the debt if it came to that. I'd do Social Security, I'd do military and that. And then some of these other agencies, would take a haircut, but we will do Social Security checks. It's important. I understand. Look, I'm a governor of Florida. I know a lot of people on Social Security, trust me. But especially in a high inflation, you don't get, the cost of living does not equate because you get a COLA increase of 8% or 9%, but the groceries have gone up 30, 40, 50, 60%. So we need to get inflation down so that those benefits actually go further than they are going right now, and we will do that for sure. Yes?
Yeah, thank you for keeping your state free during COVID. How are you what's the policy plan for spreading that across the nation and holding these people accountable?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think if you think about kind of this century, there's been three, I think, really significant events, 9/11 and the wars that followed, the financial crisis and the Great Recession, and then COVID. And of those three, I would say COVID had a broader impact on this society than any of them. As bad as 9/11 was, that was in a few spots in this country. The people that served were all volunteers. There were communities here that weren't affected at all. Even the great financial crisis, I mean, unemployment spiked, but you still had folks, who were gainfully employed. COVID affected everybody in one way or another, and negatively in many respects because of how the government responded. And I think you look back, March of 2020, some of the worst decisions that this government has ever made were made in March of 2020. Turning the government over to Fauci, which is what Trump did, was a huge, huge mistake. And I approached it different in Florida. My view was, and I thought about kind of farewell address from Dwight Eisenhower. If you read that, people remember it for the military-industrial complex warning, which was important. But he also talked about in that address that they were in an era where there was an intermingling of government and scientific research. Government was funding a lot of this stuff. And he said there's a danger that given that relationship, that public policy itself could be taken captive by what he called the scientific technological elite. And he said that was something that we should be very worried about. Because he said those people, and I think he's talking about people like Fauci, they have such a narrow view, and their agenda is not the agenda that's best for the entire country. And he says a statesman can't just subcontract out leadership to somebody like that. A statesman's got to harmonize all the different interests in society so that you're able to make decisions that are in the public interest. So, for example, with COVID, they were doing things and advocating things that even for health was not good. And people say, oh, you got to balance economy, health. Even health, it was bad because they were scaring people. You had people having heart attacks who were too scared to go to the hospital, having strokes too scared to go to the hospital, missing checkups. They were telling people to isolate in their house. That takes a toll on people's mental health, physical health. So even on the health, what they were doing was not best for overall health. It was tunnel vision, thinking that they could somehow stop a highly contagious respiratory virus that had already spread a lot. And they didn't even have the tools to identify this. They weren't doing the antibody studies. It was a total failure of CDC, NIH, FDA, all these agencies. And the problem is they act like they've done a good job with this. They did not do a good job. If it wasn't for states like Florida and Iowa and Georgia dragging this country out of lockdown, you would have had even more damage that was done. But we have communities in this country that have not recovered from the lockdowns to this day. San Francisco has not recovered. There's others that have not recovered. I don't think you would have had the BLM riots happen the way they did if you didn't have the lockdowns. I think that created a lot of pent-up energy to just kind of act out. And then you think of these public health bureaucrats. They're telling you, because they yell at me in Florida, oh, there's people on the beach. The governor's killing people by letting people on the beach. Oh, the people are playing golf in Florida. How awful, all this stuff. And they would do that. And they basically said you had to just isolate in your house. You shouldn't be doing anything. Then you have the BLM riots. And these same public health bureaucrats were asked, well, wait a minute. You've been saying people should stay at home. Are you saying that these people for BLM should also stay at home? And they said, no. We think that fighting racism is public health importance. And so we don't think they should have to stay at home. But the people that want to protest lockdowns, they should stay at home. And I'm just thinking to myself, what a fraud these people are. How ridiculous are they? And so they're lying, they're doing all this. So I'm the only candidate that is going to bring a reckoning to all these agencies, CDC, FDA, NIH, others, Fauci, all this stuff. We need accountability. We need it now because we can never let this happen to our country ever again.
About the price of butter. When my husband and I got married in 2019, butter was maybe $2 a pound. And now butter, well, it's like $4 a pound. I'm, fruit and bananas. I got 2 little boys eating us out of house and home. What do you do about it?
Well, I think it all goes back, quite frankly, to the, I think it goes back to the COVID lockdowns, the supply chain disruptions, the increase now in energy prices, some of the bureaucracy that's causing things to be more expensive. So it's an inflationary problem, and it's only going to be solved by a change of policy. But if you think about when they say the inflation, oh, it was only up 4%. Groceries have doubled for most people in the last 3 years. I mean, I mentioned this at the debate. I talked to like multiple people now out and about, who talk about, they get what they need, they're running it through the checkout line, and then the price is going up so high that they have to stop, take things out, and they can't even process everything that they're doing because of how high the prices are. So that's just the reality, but the root of it is the federal government borrowing, printing, and spending, the Federal Reserve doing what they did to create this. I'm going to rein in the Federal Reserve as well. I mean, they should not be economic central planning this country. You do a stable currency, that's your job, and that's what we should have. We should not have QE, infinity, and all this other stuff. That benefits wealthy people with a lot of assets. It socks it to working people because it's just not conducive to them getting ahead. So there's a lot that you need to do, but the groceries, then you have energy, the direction Biden wants to go on that. Hard to raise a family on that. Then if you need to buy a home, interest rates are so high that you're paying twice as much on a monthly basis as you would have been a few years ago for basically the same home. That's unaffordable. Cars are gone up 70% for a new car to be able to afford that. So like if you're working hard and you're doing everything right and you're trying to raise family and you're falling further and further behind, that means the American dream is dying in this country. And if those people can't do well, then we're just not going to succeed as a country. So help is on the way. We are going to dig in and we are going to get the job done. So thank you all. God bless you.